Hi, I'm Tasha, and this is Parents of Mouth Breathers, a podcast for parents who are done being dismissed and who are eager to advocate for their child's health. So, today's episode is going to be about paediatric sleep apnea. It's very real, it's not rare, and it's not just a little bit of noisy breathing, and it's certainly not normal, like I was told. Ultimately, it's oxygen desaturation, it's fragmented sleep, chronic fatigue, and whole host of issues linked to it, from behavioural issues to missed developmental milestones for some children. It's often mistaken for ADHD. I see a lot of specialists now that work in fields linked to airway health that say if your child has been diagnosed with ADHD or there are some behavioural issues, please get them assessed for sleep disordered breathing. Sleep is fundamental to our child's health. And unfortunately, it often gets brushed aside, especially in kids who don't necessarily present like the textbook. And I know this not because I'm medically trained, but because I've lived it. And I think that actually matters more. So, with my eldest son, the signs were there really early. At around 2.5, I could hear him snoring from the other side of the house. I had always seen that he was mouth breathing. I didn't realize at the time that that was necessarily a problem. He had breastfed until he was about 2.5. So it was between sort of the ages of 2.5 and 3 that I really noticed there was a difference because he used to go off to sleep on my boob, and so therefore he always breathed through his nose. It was after that period of time had completed for us that I recognized that actually he was mouth breathing, snoring, breathing really loud, having disturbed sleep. And I also started noticing the frequent pauses, sometimes really long pauses, the really dramatic gasping for air as well. That came with really cranky days, puffy eyes and under eye bags, and sometimes he was really enraged in the morning. He never ever seemed to wake rested. And I remember how that felt just looking at him, thinking, I know there's something off. What do I do? Where do I go? And I never felt heard. At the time, I just had my second child, so this sort of coincided with that postpartum time where everything's up in the air anyway. You're struggling on minimal sleep yourself. You're obviously getting to know your new child. We had some issues with him feeding and tongue tie and all that kind of stuff, so that took center stage. But after about 6 months of him being born, I eventually went to the GP and raised the concerns with my second son. If you've listened to any of the episodes leading up to it, there's one on tongue tie in which I explain how I got to learn that what was happening with my son certainly was concerning and that I wasn't just being paranoid. So after that time, when my son was about 3.5, I raised it with the GP several times, and I remember him turning around to me and smirking as though the pictures and the videos that I was showing him of my son sleeping with his mouth wide open and snoring were endearing. I brought it with a health visitor as well. I mentioned the constant congestion, the way that he was always tired. He would always get up several times in the night, and he still does. But each time I had the same answers. He's fine, it's normal. The doctor said to me that apnea is normal to varying degrees in everybody. The age old one, if he'll grow out of it, he still hasn't, by the way, nearly 3 years later. So in the October, we had a phrenectomy, which is a tongue release, which you can listen to in a previous episode because that's quite interesting for those of you that are looking for alternative solutions. Maybe there's something going on and that could be it. And there was an immediate improvement until it didn't work anymore. We tried cranial osteopathy, which is effectively releasing some of the tension around his neck and his jaw and his shoulders and all that kind of. It helped a little bit, but it wasn't a permanent solution. We cut out dairy and some other food groups as well, which I noticed his behaviour improved significantly with the removal of that. Dairy is a food that can bring on a lot more of that congestion. I've really noticed the difference when he has it and when he doesn't. I took him also to an airway dentist. She mapped out a really clear plan: ENT, myofunctional therapy, which was starting really soon. I went back to the GP, pushed for an ENT appointment. At the time, I didn't know that ENT is where you go for a sleep study. I sort of take that for granted now as I'm talking about it, but at the time, I didn't know it would be under ENT. And yes, we had an appointment, and the initial appointment was a brief look in my eldest son's mouth to assess the tonsils. I asked him to also have a look at tongue tie. It was a very awful meeting. The guy didn't want to really engage with me in terms of what I was learning about sleep disordered breathing. So I asked for a second opinion. So after that appointment, it was determined that they would do a sleep study for my eldest. And that was arranged. And that happened around 7 months later, which is so frustrating. Just a slight segue here. I did look into doing that privately, but I was told that the monitoring equipment is kept within the NHS. It's all centralised now. So even though the private clinic, which is called Spire here in Cardiff, that they used to have the equipment there, they no longer do that. So even if we wanted to have ENT surgery further down the line, a tonsillectomy, adenoidectomy, we would still need to go through this particular route to be able to get referred for that. We would still have to have the sleep study done through the NHS, which is just, I mean, it just, yeah, it blows my mind that that is a thing. You can buy equipment online to do these sleep studies yourself at home. They won't use that data to refer you for surgery. So it's all a big mix up. And again, more delays, more bureaucracy, just so frustrating. Anyway, 7 months later, we go for the sleep study, and he came back that it is sleep apnea. As the parent, again, coming back to my own attunement with my son, I'm the one that's watched him. I've sat in his room alongside him at night, seen the gasping, the sweating, the frequent pauses. I still do. And I felt sort of the impact on lots of elements of his behavior, his speech, his attention span, his overall spark, getting very tired in the day, not typical of his age range. So, from that appointment with those results, it was decided that if we wanted, we could refer him for a tonsillectomy. We were told that there was quite a significant waiting list of at least around 18 months, which we're coming up to now, actually. After that appointment, I was extremely frustrated. I couldn't understand what the surgeon was telling me. There was a barrier in communication. He had an extremely thick accent. He was very reluctant to respond to any of my questions. In fact, his responses were quite incoherent. So I was asking him very straightforward questions in relation to some of the stuff that I'd read in both Breathe and Jaws, the two books I always highly recommend. And he was so defensive, it was unbelievable. So I asked for a second opinion, which happened 3 months later. And oh gosh, that was even worse. I won't bore you with that in today's episode, but that surgeon was just what you imagine a narcissistic, superior type of character being questioned about their area of expertise in a really non confrontational, just genuinely curious way, sitting in the chair, leg crossed, shrugging, putting these sort of weird faces, just very dismissive, not wanting to engage in the conversation. Anyway, it was decided on that day that my son would be referred for a tonsillectomy. So, yeah, he's still on the waiting list for that at the moment. So, despite the appointments that we've had with the GPs, the appointments that we've had with several ENT surgeons, one thing they don't tell you is that mouth breathing isn't harmless and that sleep apnea isn't harmless. In fact, they're quite blasé about it in my experience. And they're wrong, quite frankly, because there are so many professionals out there in different disciplines that really see this for what it is. That mouth breathing and sleep apnea, sleep disordered breathing, is not good. It reshapes the face, it affects the bite, it dries out the airway, it makes everything more inflamed. And snoring isn't cute, it isn't funny, it isn't endearing. It's a sign that the child is struggling, that the airway is struggling. And kids with sleep apnea don't always look necessarily unwell. I can definitely see those clear signs. I also notice it in a lot of other children, but sometimes they just seem super hyper or moody or off. And you, as the parent, you're left sort of being gaslit, told you're anxious, told you're overthinking. And meanwhile, the reality of it is your child is losing oxygen night after night, or the oxygen's not absorbing in the way that it needs to. And that affects so many things from, the growth hormone to general immunity. it just affects everything. And so, as a parent, it is on you to fight the system and to be able to get the answers that you need so you can get your child the treatment they need. What I'm learning about airway health in general, it is a multidisciplinary approach that needs to be taken in order to support your child. Just blindly going for a tonsillectomy isn't going to answer the question. It could really help with a lot of it, but I'm one of those people that needs to understand, why do we need the tonsils out? What is it that's causing that? If we take them out, is that going to solve the mouth breathing? These are all questions that I have, that I still have, that I'm planning on asking specialists on this podcast. So, if you're here right now and you're listening because you're deep in this mess as well, I just want you to know a couple of things. You're not overreacting. You can ask for a sleep study, even if your GP is a little bit reluctant to do so. You can ask for a referral to ENT. I also want to say that a mild sleep apnea doesn't mean that there isn't any problem. A mild sleep apnea or severe sleep apnea, whatever it is, sleep apnea is not good. You can always push for a second interpretation, like I did. When you're with the NHS, be prepared that you're going to be waiting a little while. I would say keep a diary, film your child when they're sleeping, and build your case around it. But ultimately, trust your gut, what well looks like in your child. And this is definitely not it. As far as I'm concerned, witnessing a child gasping in their sleep, mouth wide open, a constant dry mouth, bit of a smelly breath is just not right. And you as a parent know that, like I know it. And there are specialists out there that take this stuff very seriously. I started this podcast, Parents of Mouth Breathers, because I felt like I've been shouted into a void, like I'm the only one who sees it and cares about it. I've been told to stop asking questions while my child was struggling to breathe properly through the night. But you are not alone, not anymore. We are ultimately the parents who notice and care enough to try and take action on this, that we keep asking questions. We don't want to give up. And if the system that we're in, particularly here in the UK, it doesn't create a natural pathway for our kids, we have to then go and build one for ourselves. And that comes around getting more knowledge on it, being really informed, building community, and obviously creating some noise around it as well. It isn't good enough that you go to a GP concerned about your child's breathing and they tell you that snoring is normal. That is not good enough. It isn't good enough that you go to an ENT surgeon and they tell you that mild sleep apnea is okay. That it's nothing major to worry about, and that mouth breathing isn't something to be concerned about. That isn't right. That ENT surgeons whose specialism is in that area, all those mechanisms that we use to breathe, they don't know about mouth breathing. They don't know about sleep disordered breathing in the way that they need to, and the downstream effects of all the other health implications. It's not fair. It's not acceptable. So we are the ones that have to try and build something different and look at the different disciplines that can help our children and build that team around us that can give the treatment for our children that they really need. Thank you so much for being here. I really hope this helped. If it did, please share it with others. The more of us that know, the more of us that can make changes in our children's lives. Please feel free to send it to another mum who's still in the trenches. And remember, you're not paranoid, you're just being perceptive, and that really matters. So I will see you next week after I've calmed myself down from just getting a little bit on my high horse there. But as I said, we deserve better, and our children certainly do. But I'll see you next week on Parents of Mouth Breathers. Bye.